This single lesson is probably the most impactful mindset shift that I have experienced throughout the decade of being in the creative services industry. If you're going to learn anything from this entire video, this is the one to really pick up and focus on, is to stop focusing on finishing the project and focus on... I realized this weekend that I've sold £800,000 worth of creative services over my time in business, doing things like logo design, name development, brand strategies, website development, all that sort of stuff, which equals roughly $1 million, just over. Last time I checked, around $200,000 of that $1 million was generated through the platform Fiverr alone. And I wanted to make a video focused around the top principles or kind of rules that have helped me to do that. One of the most important things, this is kind of the first rule, the first principle that I think every single creative person that is selling a service, that is selling anything, a solution to a client, breaking your mindset limitations. For example, think about the creative service that you offer. It can be anything. It can be logo design. It can be brand naming, which was a huge breakthrough for me. I'll tell you a personal story in a little bit. It could be website development. The amount that you're charging right now, the most that you've ever charged for that service, it's most likely absolutely nowhere near how much you could potentially charge for that service. And I learned this. I was traveling in China. I got to a point where I didn't want to do any more work. I was burnt out. I literally just needed a break. And I can either turn my Fiverr profile off and just stop working completely, or maybe I can just put my gig prices to an obscene number, a number which I never thought anybody would purchase, right? And I think for my brand naming gig at the time, which is essentially sending 5 brand name ideas with, trademark checks and slogans and a couple of other things, I think at the time I was maybe charging around $400, which is actually still far more than most people on the platform, even today. And this was 6 years ago, probably. I think I put it up to around $1,200, which is, multiple times more than what I was charging already. And I left it. Out of nowhere, 3 days into the trip, I get an order from this random guy, I still remember, in the real estate sector, looking to name his new real estate firm. And that was a huge breakthrough for me, because I realized that I'd been undercharging the entire time. What I think is really funny is the fact that to get the same amount of money that I made with that one single client, I'd previously had to have worked with 3 or 4 clients, which is so much time and so much energy. And you essentially have to get, 3 or 4 great results as opposed to just one great result. So you can invest double the time and you're still saving 50% of your overall time on the one client as opposed to serving 3 or 4. And that opened my eyes to my limited beliefs and what I thought my services and my value was. But the reality is, until you actually push through and take that chance and just test it for a week or 2 weeks, maybe you have 2 client calls and you just price them maybe 30% over what you usually charge. If you get one of them to say yes, your entire mindset shifts. I think the second thing that I think is super important for any creative person is to have a really great digital presence. And what I mean by that is making sure that your portfolio specifically only shows the most up-to-date and best version of your work. So I work with a lot of designers, brand designers mostly. And when I see that portfolio, when we kind of audit, at what stage they're at and what's working for them, what's not working for them, they still have projects from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, which is fine. But the reality is that those projects are not a true reflection of your current skill level. Put yourself in a position where the client is judging your worst project, your worst work, and they're still wow, even if my project is the worst that this person can do, I'm still going to be pretty happy. Because when someone is trying to hire a creative person, they usually aren't hiring them based on their creativity. They're hiring them based on safety and security. can this person provide the solution that I need? That's ultimately what they're asking themselves. And if you can do that, if you can give them that feeling of peace of mind, then they're going to be far more likely to hire you. Part of that is kind of running into step 3 or rule 3 or principle 3, which is to make the first step easy and low risk. A lot of brand designers that I speak to overcomplicate the process of onboarding. I personally do a 15-minute discovery call. So anybody, no matter what size of your project, can book a 15-minute discovery call on my website. And that is just super low risk. It's super low investment. And it gets me on a call with the client. The first step is to just get them on board, get them invested, get them investing some form of time or some form of energy. I personally don't work with any clients that don't book a call first. I say that very, very clearly on all of my gigs on Fiverr, on my website. And that's super important because I feel like if a client isn't willing to spend 15 minutes with me on a call, they're not truly invested in actually getting the best result. You need to raise your prices often. This is kind of related to the first point of kind of breaking your mindset. I was speaking to a photographer on Instagram maybe 2 weeks ago, and she said that she was closing around 9 out of 10 sales calls that she had. And I said, that's far too much. Like I just said, listen, if I was you, I would raise my prices by 30% tomorrow. You're going to make more by working with less people. You should be closing around 40% of your sales calls roughly, I think. That's a pretty good number. If you start going lower than that, then maybe you have to pull your prices down slightly, depending on obviously how much your expenses are, etc. We'll get into that a little bit later. If you're closing every single client that you work with, you are undercutting yourself by a fair amount, most likely. And you're leaving money on the table and you're working far harder than you need to earn the money that you're making. The reality is that if you have lots of different clients and you have to manage all of them at the same time, you're kind of capped at the level and the standard of service that you can provide because we've only got 24 hours in a day. So you can either hire a full team and have someone manage them for you and get back to them thoughtfully and provide revisions for them in an adequate time frame, or you can just charge more, work with less clients, but provide a far better service and help them walk away with far more value. The brand designers that I work with, and also my personal experience as well, we're all very unique and we're all good at certain things. And the reality is that we cannot be amazing at everything. We can be good at certain things and we can be adequate and provide an adequate service in other areas, but we should always lead with the thing that we are the best at. I'm not nowhere near the best in the world in regards to logo design, but when I work with people in regards to naming, they like working with me and therefore they end up working with me in regards to logo design based on their previous experience with me in naming. And we've created some really great logos that I'm super happy with, but it all comes from leading with that first initial thing, the thing that I can be one of the best in the world at. I think that if you can choose a thing that you personally feel that you can be one of the best in the world at, I think that can put you head and shoulders above most others in the industry. And another thing, which I think is probably going to give you just as much of an advantage, if not more, in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to negotiations and, pitching for projects and winning projects as well, and just seeming confident overall, is maximizing your runway. So this simply means having dough in the bank. So the Freedom Fund is what I basically spoke to this photographer about. And I said, how many months could you live if you didn't get a single other project? So how many months worth of expenses do you have saved up in the bank basically? And just to be completely fully transparent, last time I checked, which was last month, the start of last month, I have around 8 years and 3 months worth of Freedom Fund. So if I didn't get another project for 8 years and 3 months, I would be okay. And that just helps me to go into every single project understanding that if I don't get 9 out of 10 sales, or maybe even all of them, I've still got 8 years and 2 months left. And I think that if you can put yourself in a position where you don't have a huge amount of expenses and bills to pay out every single month, and you can keep your expenses to a minimum, then you can put yourself in a far stronger position when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to building a business, because business is ultimately down to profit, right? You can sell $1 million worth of creative services, but if my expenses are $1.2 million, then, it doesn't really matter. Master just one single sales channel. In the very, very, very beginning, that was Fiverr. It was the place that I was getting the most clients. Now, people tend to just kind of come direct through my website. But in the beginning, it was just one single platform. And what that did is it allowed me to grow my authority within that particular platform to a certain size, where now I'm the most expensive person on that platform because I've got so much experience and also social proof. And you just going into every single sales call with complete confidence that they know that you know what you're talking about, so you can have a really in-depth, effective conversation from the first second you get on the call. When you have a bad client, thank them. Every single client that I've had that I've thought of as bad has actually taught me the best lessons to move my business forward. What usually happens when a creative person has a bad client or someone that doesn't appreciate their work, they usually think, this client has no taste, or they're just a nightmare to work with, or maybe even worse, like maybe they're an asshole or something, they're disrespectful. 99.9% of the time, it isn't the case. This single lesson is probably the most impactful kind of mindset shift that I have experienced throughout the decade of being in the creative services industry. If you're going to learn anything from this entire video, this is the one to really pick up and focus on, is to stop focusing on finishing the project and focus on blowing minds. You are not just trying to get the client to sign it off and tick the box and move on to the next. Really take the time to blow the client away. When you're creating mock-ups for the packaging, do that little detail which you don't have to do and the client would never recognize it, but just do it anyway, just because it's for you. It's not for the client, it's for you. Even though this does not benefit me financially, and any time that I spend on this project is actually costing me money because I can't work on a different project, this is the mindset that you have to have. And I really hope that this video has been valuable. I really hope that it's given you a couple of things to think about. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. See you in the next one.